This is Dan Drake, front up on Geno TV, Channel 99. We have today with us Tobias Glidden, the newest member of the Board of Selectmen.
Good morning.
Congratulations.
Dan?
May I call you Toby?
Yes, you can.
Thank you. Old habits die hard. So what did you do last night after you found out you were at the polls?
Yeah, I was really kind of just shocked. I really wasn't prepared for anything at all, besides knowing what's going on with the board, and so I just kind of spent a lot of time on Facebook, talking to friends, making phone calls, giving them a lot of thanks to people, talking with some close friends of mine, just some familiar voices to kind of ground me and just remember who I was and just kind of let the moment pass. And later this week we're gonna have a little celebration,
Good.
But it's straight down to business the next morning, so it's like you can't get out too much.
Were you able to go to sleep last night?
Yeah.
Good.
I woke up with the worst Charlie horse though on the leg from standing out there in the sun all day.
Oh yeah, the sun and the hard pavement and the cold wind and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
So who are you?
Who am I? Gee, that's a tough question, Dan. Well, I guess I'm a lot of what my parents are, which are really honest, hardworking people. My mother, if you ever get a chance to meet her, is
I know her.
Big, huge heart, loves to help people. Very compassionate, loves to, the old ways, like the Otisons, recycling things. Not even recycle, but using what you have at your hand.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of me. I was homeschooled. I think that's a big part. I love...
All the way through?
Up to, there's back and forth, but I was homeschooled up till 7th and 8th grade, went to public school, homeschooled 9th, and then went to the high school...
for the rest of it.
For the rest of it, till I graduated in 07. And so learning, I'm interested in anything, really. I'm curious. I'm generally curious about pretty much anything. I want to know how things work. Ken Jennings, the guy on Jeopardy, was saying that the people who win Jeopardy, they're not some weird geeks who memorize things. They're just curious about things, and I really relate to that. So
that's good. Your campaign major campaign platform.
I like that phrase.
It's balanced, right? You use that word a lot. It was on your sign that you were holding yesterday.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that?
I think I kind of meant, I feel like in our politics, nationally, locally, statewide, there's a huge burden being put on the young people, and we're not getting a voice in that, financially. And so I wanted to bring some balance to the board, and that's what I really meant by that. And also kind of just the real Nantucket perspective of being like thrifty and working together and working with one another. I think that's what balance is. That's what sustainability isn't all about bicycles and groceries. It's about having a sustainable relationship, having parameters that work for people. So that was important to me.
The idea of the young people bearing a burden is one that doesn't hear that a whole lot, reading the press or in interviews or whatever. How do you mean that? Do you mean that in the context of an aging population? Do you mean that in the context of just overall?
It's two-sided coin. One, young people aren't getting involved, and so we're not meeting our end, and the other side of it is that I don't think there's enough understanding of like looking ahead. And when you're younger, you're looking ahead. You're always, I'm thinking, what's the world going to be like in 2050? What's the world going to be like in 100 or 2100? What's it going to be, and what can we do through planning to get there in a nice way and work together to get there? So that's, I don't know if that answers your question.
Well,
but
you can answer it a lot of ways. That's the way you answered it, so that's good. So what do you think are the most pressing issues facing Nantucket right now?
I think probably the biggest, pressing is an interesting word. So it's more about what are the most, where are we most at risk? And what are the impacts of that risk in certain scenarios. And I think the real big one that just kind of sticks off to me is the harbor. If we were to lose, the scallop industry due to fertilizers, sewer, yachts with leaking oil, guys running their two-stroke cylinder engines around the harbor, that would be devastating to the island in so many ways. Culturally, economically, I think people wouldn't really be interested in coming here, and it's really important to realize that there is some pollution problems, and they're way better here than they are in a lot of places, but we need to take those really seriously. So that's a big priority, and SHAB's really looking at that seriously. And I think that's, it's a thing to talk to other communities about that. We have a problem, because we're driving and pollutants are coming in and from a lot of different things into our watershed, and that all goes into the harbor. And it's not to say that we should be turning a blind eye to it and saying, oh, there's a problem here on the island, maybe you shouldn't be coming here. But no, we have a problem and we're dealing with it, and we want you to deal with it, and we can work together in this country to deal with these pollution problems.
It's interesting. Nantucket, as you know, was one of the first, if not the first, community in Massachusetts to have sewers. But on the other hand, you also, when you think of it in the context that 100 years ago, there were horses, there were other things that were going on to pollute the harbor.
Oh yeah,
in a big way, in a very different way than from today.
Oh yeah.
And yet, as recently as the early 80s, we had 100,000 bushel scallop seasons.
That's crazy. People, that's a great point. People ask, how's the scallop season? To me all the time. My dad, and I see the scallopers and I weigh them up and I go, nothing like it used to be.
That's right.
Nothing like it used
to be.
But
I think one of the things that people haven't really talked about is what has changed. Is it, because human waste, horse waste, all that stuff used to go right into the harbor.
Right.
And now you have fertilizer and you have oil sediment from cars and so forth that go into the harbor. Yeah. What is really the problem is we really don't know.
No, we don't. But we're we're doing some really good research down on the waterfront, right across from Cumbies, to kind of look into the pollutants that are going into that area, into that ground. It's a big watershed, and I think we need to be really pushing that issue to the top, saying this is the water of Nantucket, the connectedness of the community is what's important historically right now, and we need to bring that together. So that's one of the biggest issues.
While we're talking about that, what about the whole Mattocket sewer issue?
The Mattocket sewer, I'm not 100% up to speed on all these issues, but that'll come very quickly. Sewer, I think the best way to kind of approach it is kind of look at how much are people using, what are they putting in? Personally, how can you take responsibility for your own waste, your own refuse? That's the priority, personal responsibility. I think second is going to be a mixed plan of saying, looking at what places do we really need the sewer in that makes sense, and we're looking at 100 years. So what places are going to have eroded away? In Mattocket, there's a lot of erosion out there. Are we going to be putting sewer out there and then taking it away in 50 years? I don't know. So looking at what needs it the most, closest to the Mattocket Harbor, I think is important. And as far as the plant goes, it's really hard to justify.
No, I hadn't thought of this before, but one of the things that is that I guess people don't realize is that when you use a septic system for part of the year, basically it loses all its ability to bacterially consume the waste, and people don't think of that.
That's a great point.
And as I say, it just occurred to me that we need to do some education on that. How, flushing yeast down the toilet when you come back.
Dan, that is an awesome commentary, and I think that's really speaks to where we are in the 21st century. Is we're going from this really mechanical, a sewer system is a mechanical system, to really understanding that's a biological system. And there's a lot of complex soil biology and different microbes in there that are doing all the work. And there's other communities that are using their soil for energy or using their waste for fertilizers. In Germany, all urine is used on the fields. And there's a lot we can kind of do to mitigate that. And so I think that's right on. Education is huge. Getting people involved and understanding and caring about it as an individual person, so you can connect with people about what they're doing, not about the harbor, but about them, their lawn, their ground underneath them. Do you want to contaminate that? No, you want to take care of it. So I think that's right on.
Is there a risk? I mean, tourism and of late, whether you agree with it or not, one of the things that has really sort of provided the economic driver for Nantucket are new large homes, with big lawns and all this kind of thing. And presumably, we don't want to lose that. We may not like it, but we don't want to lose it. But so how do you deal with the guy in that context that you're talking about who flies in for 3 weeks in the summer? True of some people, probably an exaggeration in many cases. And says, I want a green lawn, and I don't care what it costs me to get a green lawn.
Well, there's...
And if I can't have a green lawn, I'm going to move somewhere else where I can.
Right. Well, I think I think when you're making decisions, you have to first look at what your framework is. What are your limiting factors? When I'm laying out a stone patio, I'm looking at the grade, I'm looking at the pitch, I'm looking at my stones, I'm looking at where the buildings are, knowing where my edges are. And I think that's something we need to decide as an island. Is that okay for a gentleman who's flying in for 3 weeks, a month, 2 months, to have a green lawn if it compromises the harbor for all of us? And for me, I think there's a line that needs to be drawn in the sand that's saying, you know what, it is not acceptable to pollute something that everybody uses. And of course, there's people who can have green lawns. The golf course is a great example of that. Using the fertilizers properly, using organics, regulating how you do it really properly, there's not a problem. There's test wells, it's not a problem. So I don't think there's a problem with people having green lawns. They just have to
do it right.
And that's about educating our landscapers. That's not about educating the clients. We need to educate our landscapers how to do it right. And they're willing, I think they're looking for it. And I understand that there's some costs associated with that. And that's something they have to understand, that if they want to do business on Nantucket, they have to do it the right way so that we can my generation can have a harbor.
What else besides the harbor?
What other
big issues the town and the town government face at this point?
Town government, I was talking to my mom this morning, I'd like to get 10 new people involved in town government. Whoever they are, 10 new people would be great. That would be really exciting. Just continue to get more people. I really believe that the more people you get involved in an issue, the better your result is going to be. And really encouraging people to work together and to sort things out and understand that you're going to conflict, but don't take it personally. So that's another priority. Fiscally, that's going to be a big project. Craig Sperry talked about this at a town meeting, and the longevity pay and not longevity pay, but
longevity pay,
longevity pay and
retirement.
Pensions and all that. We're going to have to look at that really seriously, because I know all my friends, we don't expect to even get Social Security. My whole generation doesn't expect it to even be there.
It'll be there.
Well, we'll see.
It'll be
there. But just to kind of give you a perspective of where...
We may not have an army, but we'll have Social Security.
But you know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean.
It's where my constituents and my perspective is coming from. So I want to get that sorted out so that when we do have storms, we have money to deal with problems.
There's a flip side to that, and the flip side is services.
Right.
And enforcement. I was talking a little while ago with Matt Fee about enforcement and the fact that there are a lot of town regulations out there and town boards that aren't being backed up by enforcement. How do you deal with that in this sort of fiscal restraint era?
still getting up to speed with things. So I'm definitely going to be listening to people a lot about how to deal with that. But I think, again, it comes back to knowing what your end parameters are, saying if we say something, we have to be able to do it. If it costs us money to have enforcement so that things are done ethically and right and people can have confidence in their government and in their community, then we have to do it, whatever the cost is. Whether it's another 500.
Well, if you have a rule and you don't enforce it,
it's not a rule at all.
it's not a rule at all. Exactly. So, anything else that comes to mind?
Anything else?
You've already got a fairly extensive menu there, but
yeah. Anything else that comes to mind? There's a lot. I think a downtown revitalization, working that in with the Mid-Island, dealing with starting to look at our capital projects instead of as individual pieces, looking at a whole. How do things integrate? People talk about a bike path down Washington Street. Totally against that. You can't put a bike path down Washington Street. There's it's getting smashed every year by the storms.
could you put a bike lane? Could you paint a bike lane on the street?
And why not? There was a Mid-Island plan done up a couple of years ago by David Vorse. They put $60,000 into it, and they said, let's make Sparks and Pleasant one ways. Let's open up parking on Pleasant. Let's have a bike lane in there. I think that's awesome. And I think we need to start thinking about how the island works as a whole instead of each individual project. Well, what does this project cost? I know down at the duck pond they're looking at putting up millions of dollars to deal with that. It's a swamp. Let it be a swamp. There's a great historical railroad path there. I understand. Let it go. You have to let it go. It's backing up. It's causing problems. It's because we came in there and we changed that environment, and now we're paying the price for it. So I say let it return back instead of putting in all these engineered solutions to the problem. Let nature do it.
Have you heard about this proposed mushroom solution?
I have.
What do you think of that?
I think, I've talked to Todd Leftwich about it very extensively and Sarah Oktay, and I think they're exactly where I'm at. It's something that will work. It's complicated. It's super, you're dealing with a huge amount of factors. It's not like how high you build your dam or what size your filter is. It's how do you get the mushroom? He's going out and cultivating mushrooms that he finds on Nantucket. And then, right now he's taking samples to figure out what the contaminants are. He's cultivating mushrooms to deal with those specific contaminants and then bring the mushrooms to deal with that. And it's a project that does work. Paul Stemets is a great mushroom guy, and it's something that does work, but it takes a lot of time, and it takes people getting involved and realizing that it's important to give him the support he needs to get it done.
As an observer, to change the subject, as an observer of the government scene for the last several years, do you think there are ways it could be improved?
It's a hot question. There's there's the talk of the town. And then there's what I think. I'm really not an expert in how to operate towns really efficiently. I see what I think is right.
I don't know if you could ever operate one really efficiently, but can you operate it more efficiently?
Well, let's just talk about things. People talk about Libby Gibson having too much power, or the police chief having too much power, or the DPW head, or whoever it may be, and I'm not attacking any of those people because I know them all, and I think I'm getting to know them personally, and we need to understand that those people, everyone in the town is governed by the Board of Selectmen. It's an elected body, and they decide how things run. So if they have a problem with anything, it's the Board of Selectmen's fault. I really feel that's really important to understand, first off.
It's an interesting point of view, but isn't the Board of Selectmen's role really to set policy and evaluate the town manager?
That is its role.
Yeah. Is that running the town?
That is. I'd be
interested to see if you feel that way a year from now.
We'll see. Yeah. We'll still see. And that's why I say I don't want to come out too quick and say anything. People talk about. There's a number of different things. I said more ballot questions, less cut down town meeting to a quick night where you talk about really specific things. It's the debate in town meeting. You know, when Craig came up and he talked about it, we had a great debate, a bunch of people standing up and talking. And then we spent a bunch of time, the same amount of time, talking about $45,000 for some shelves. You know, it's like, we can talk about $100 million and $45,000 in the same amount of time. So we need to prioritize what goes on town meeting. People talk about it.
But you can't, basically. How do you prioritize? You have the right, the way it's set up now.
I think it comes from creating a culture that encourages people to come to committees and sort out their problems, and creating a culture that says, you know what, we want those committees to bring people in, to come up with resolutions. And so people don't have to go into free cash or to deal with these problems at town meeting floor. They are respected in the community, the board members are respected, and people can come together and deal with those problems. Because that's what I think happens, is we have these issues because things aren't being dealt with in the committees, not the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Selectmen, the Finance Committee, Tax Advisory Committee, you name it. You know, those committees are set up to run our government. And we need to appoint really good people to get people involved to deal with those problems. So when we come to town meeting, we don't have all this stuff to deal with, because it's been dealt with and talked about.
You mentioned a few minutes ago when we were talking about the harbor, you mentioned SHAB. SHAB may be the perfect storm, in a sense, in terms of a body that really doesn't have any authority.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, quote, an advisory body. I think that's what the legislation says. It's supposed to be called in for a couple of specific things, like the selection of the harbor master, which it isn't. But otherwise, it's an advisory group. Should that be changed? Should it have more direct authority?
I'm not.
I mean, looking at it, I'm not picking on SHAB per se. But you have SHAB
committees in general.
No, yeah, because you have SHAB, you have the Planning Board, you have the HDC, you have the Zoning Board of Appeals. Each of them has a sort of a different level of authority, and some of it's very specific, and that, of course, is right. But the question is, should these be looked at to see whether they need to be restructured somewhat? I mean, we went through an effort, like, 3 or 4 years ago. Alan Reinhardt led the Government Study Committee, and that basically went nowhere except to change the name of the town administrator to town manager.
Well, I think that's something that definitely needs to be looked at. I'm not 100% on all those issues. Again, I'm just getting caught up to speed, Dan. And there's a big learning curve. The first month or two, I'm going to pick up a lot, and in 2 months from now, I can answer these questions so much. I'm excited. I'm excited to learn so much. And to answer your question, I think, yes, I think committees need to have the respect of the town, need to have the authority that's given, and need to be taken seriously, because that's the first part that gets people involved.
But by the same token, the committee needs to operate in a way that gains the respect of the town too. Right?
Exactly.
And that's an issue that we've seen in spades.
And so there's kind of like, the town needs to make an adjustment, communities need to make an adjustment, and the community needs to get more involved to help us make that adjustment in an equal way, in a balanced way.
You have an exciting time ahead of you, Toby. Thanks for being with us.
No worries, Dan.
Enjoyed it.
And I hope I can continue to listen more than I can talk for the first.
That's a lesson I've never learned. Thank you.